exhausted. Let's listen to that. I must say, Maggie, you do so much. Yes.
As always, I have a question.
Oh, yes,
Hello.
please. Hello. I should have asked.
That's right. In the years ahead, do you think businesses, corporates are going to prioritise sustainability or social value?
Well, I mean, I don't think that there necessarily has to be a discrepancy between the two, because I think if we get this right, we should be looking at social value. We have public objectives which are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, and the SDGs are running until 2030. That is about value, but again, where is the expertise that you have to make sure that you are advancing sustainability that does have a social value? So I don't necessarily see that it has to be one or the other, probably
And so the reason, or the follow-up perhaps to the question is, it would appear as though the procurement departments within businesses are the ones who are to enact upon and deliver a sustainable program or a social value program. And their resources are already stretched. If they were to, perhaps this is the prediction part, if there was a need to prioritise either or, are the investors perhaps dictating or suggesting where that focus is likely to be because of the resources? Therefore, they have to prioritise one or the other.
Well, I mean, I think they take a risk-based approach. So it depends on your business and your industry and where they think that you can have the, where the risk might lie. But I mean, for all of us, if something goes wrong in our supply chain, and especially we're not a consumer brand, but if you are a consumer brand, and that goes badly wrong, that's points off your share price that investors don't want. So I think making that case internally for, again, staying the course and having the resources, I think are important. And I hope that there wouldn't be this trade-off between those two, because again, that those kind of bullet points of what I was saying in terms of that kind of fundamentals of corporate responsibility, I think they are as important today as they have always been, and they will be in the future. Maybe we won't use the same terms to describe them. I mean, ESG, that was 2 years ago. That was really cool. So let's add that to our title. Now less so. That's become more pejorative. And I was saying, this is a total aside, but I'm interested in how language changes, and I actually did my PhD on the American experience with economic planning, because on the face of it, the US has always been hands off the market. But actually, when things went badly wrong in the 1930s during the Depression, they said, well, what haven't we done? We haven't planned the economy. And so everybody liked that. And there was a state planning board. But at the end of the period that I looked at, by 1950, when planning was associated with totalitarianism, those planning boards were renamed as economic development agencies. They still exist and everybody loves them. So, we have to be flexible, not get hung up on the language. It's actually about the essence of what we do.
It's out of interest, how big is your team that's working on this crossover?
We are 8 people, but we have a model that works really well, because we are in a shared service function. And so, we need people like my colleague David in procurement. We work extremely closely with them. Our colleagues have been incredibly engaged in our socially responsible supplier program over many years. So we have these various networks. And last year, we tallied it up and said, EY, look at our numbers, see if you agree, that we had over 3,000 people involved in one of our corporate responsibility networks. They might be green teams, employee-led environmental groups. We have a network on the Sustainable Development Goals. We have responsible AI principles. I mean, whatever people want to focus on because it's part of their day job, they have an affinity. That's how we get stuff done, because we can't do it all from a central focus.
Right, well, thank you very much. I'd like you to join the panel now, Lucia, and Carl, welcome to join as well. Right. So, thank you. I bet you guys have got a load of questions. I'm kind of like bamboozled. So with all of the information, all the acronyms, all the programs that are underway. But Carl, do you want to just start off by introducing yourself and where you're at? I think you're at from the conversations we've had already today, very different stage of maturity, the journey for Monzo.
This works. Want to hear me okay? That better?
Nope.
Oh, okay, dead mic. I'll just talk loudly. Yeah, so my name is Carl. I work at Monzo in the procurement function. Thank you, that's better. Yeah, I'm responsible for, amongst other things, our scope 3, and we have a very ambitious net zero target of 2030, which was set about 4 years ago with no real data to back it up. So I've got a real fun job trying to make that happen in the next 5 years.
Okay, so one of the key things, I guess, is building on what Marcia was saying, is what is the intersection? You know, your procurement, Marcia is ESG. What's the setup like for Monzo and the interrelationship between procurement and the ESG agenda?
Well, the ESG function, I guess you can call it that, at Monzo is one person. That's been the case for the last 6 months. So we've got someone new in role who does that full time, but we are still building out how that works with procurement. So I meet with them every fortnight. We're building out a roadmap for the next few years, but we are very much at the start of our global emissions journey, I suppose.
So Marcia, what would be your key points of advice that you give to Monzo for where they're actually at on their journey, you know, to help them come up to speed with all of this and do it correctly?
Thank you. Well, I really believe that a rising tide helps all boats. So I think networks like this are incredibly important because you need to share in a safe space and talk about, you know, where the challenges are. Look for your, you know, things that might be relevant for your sector. There's so many really good sector initiatives that are out there, and some last, some don't. But if I give an example from, you know, our traditional sector is media, and we've been a part of something called the Responsible Media Forum since its inception over 15 years ago. And a number of us, you know, we were able to get our scope 1 and 2 down by moving some data centers into the cloud. So that's really great. Not our direct problem anymore, but it's in our, you know, scope 3. Gosh, how do we come up with a methodology for calculating that? And so we've been working, and we're still working with an entity called the Digital Impact of Media, which is a group of companies that had an offshoot from the Responsible Media Forum to get together to talk about, you know, what kind of a methodology, how should we be engaging with these cloud suppliers? And now we actually are kind of pushing because the environmental impact of AI, how do we address that? So I think look for what entities are out there. I've been very involved with the UN Global Compact. If you are not a signatory, I really encourage you. We have a fantastic network here in the United Kingdom, and there's just so much great content, and you can ask questions and learn from others. I mean, that's how I started, was just going around, understanding what was already happening within the business, and then just getting inspiration outside. And you have to get inspiration. You also need to not, you know, take time to step away, because it can be kind of overwhelming and frustrating. But so making sure that you keep up the enthusiasm, which can be challenging. So you nurture you as well as everybody else.
So Carl, we were talking earlier, right at the very beginning of the day, about the difficulty of getting and understanding the ESG impact on your own footprint. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're trying to do there and the challenges that you've been facing?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned cloud, because we are an entirely cloud native organization. So our scope 1 and 2 is 0.3% of our overall, which means 99.7% sits with me in scope 3. So the challenge being that we have outsourced so much that we've also outsourced our emissions, and we don't have the direct control. So working with the likes of Google, AWS, big outsourcers. Yeah, I see a few suppliers in the room here that work with Monzo. It's supplier engagement that is the primary challenge for us at the moment, and avoiding the challenges. Yeah, Alice spoke about supplier fatigue and that sort of stuff. We are, not going to be the first company to send them a question to ask them about how they're doing on their ESG agenda. We won't be the last, probably that week. So how do we make sure that we are bringing them on a journey with us and ensuring that we pick suppliers, as well as looking at our existing supplier base, but pick suppliers that are going to, from day one, be engaged with us and are going to, win business with us on their merits, amongst other things, on their, the way they tackle ESG.
So I'd be interested in your take on that, Marcia. I mean, are you managing to get responses from all of your tier one service providers? Have you had to be redlining? Do you do that sort of approach with those who aren't responding, giving the information back?
There's a lot of, CDP, for example, has got a lot of good data. So, there's a combination of trying to segment, you can't boil the ocean. So what percentage of those, would you guess of those emissions are coming from, say, your top X suppliers? Concentrate on those, where you do have, more touch points. So a combination of trying to get information directly, because that's going to be better than blunt instruments, but also looking at what's available, like through CDP. We also, it's not just about the stick, it's also about the carrot. So we just had actually last week our supplier sessions, which we recorded. We did this with the blessing of our colleagues in the socially responsible supply chain program and in procurement, where we concentrate on 3 topics. One of them was around avoiding modern slavery. One was on transformational governance. We've been involved with an initiative through the Global Compact. There's a free toolkit if you want to look at, really focusing on a big G and how that can help your business. And then the third was on setting science-based targets. So there's a member of my team who's our head of environment who knows so much more than me. And he talked about the journey that we've been on getting, it took us 2 years and a bit to get SBTI to bless our targets. And we have the funny situation where, because they were old, we are already probably going to surpass those targets, but be that as it may. So one of them is an absolute scope 3 reduction target. The other one is more qualitative, getting our suppliers, big percentage of our suppliers, 75%, I think, to set their own science-based targets. So it's not perfect, but we kind of try and do a combination of asking for the data and doing the calculations as best we can.
Right, I've got one more question and I'd like to take it to the floor. So you didn't listen to the panel because you missed this one, but we had the NGOs all discussing supplier diversity, which was fabulous. And then we were actually doing a comparison of supplier diversity programs and how you can't lift and shift from the US to the UK. What would be your words of advice of how we in the UK set up supplier diversity maybe differently than what they've done in the US to make it successful over here?
Well, I think with any program, wherever it is, whatever geography, it's better if it's not just a numbers game, that there's actually reason behind it, that you work with those who are making procurement decisions in the organization to have them understand what it means, the ways to do that, ensuring that information is broadly disseminated, and that, again, you're working with good partners who can help you, who do monitoring. But I don't know that I would have a kind of specific geographic recommendation, but I just hope that, if there is a kind of moving, let's forward, that isn't a good phrase, but in one place that we will, always show what's best practice. And I think the United Kingdom has always been a leader as it relates to sustainability in so many ways. And it will be good, over the next period for the UK to continue to show that, this is a benefit to business.
And do you think we're ever in the UK going to break away from any of the EU stuff?
Well, you can if you don't want to do business in Europe. But if you do, and of course, it's not just the UK, but there's, I don't know what the statistic is, 2,000 companies, 7,000 US companies that are in scope for CSRD, which is really interesting, right? And, do companies in X state not want to do business in California? I think they probably do. So it does create this kind of interesting dynamic, but I think we have to continue to do what we think is the right thing, and hold those values. We held them before it became trendy, and we need to keep holding them, because I think it's there's always this quest, and McKinsey's done some work on this, and you can pick all of it, you can pick some of it, like DEI, when you have more diverse teams, how that benefits the business. And this basket of companies that prioritizes this stuff does really well. I like to think that RELX, is in that category. There were a thing about companies that were part of the FTSE in 2000, and RELX is still around, and we've outperformed the FTSE for over 5 consecutive years, longer than that.
Excellent. Right. Do you have any questions for either Carl or Marcia from the floor? Narendra.
I'll make 2 sentences, statements, and then ask a question. The first one is, as a sustainability and ESG practitioner, I put companies in 3 waves or 3 buckets. The first one being those that are PR driven. And I'm saying this in the context of sustainability and ESG. The second ones are the ones that are compliance driven, or the ones that do it because they have to do it. The third ones are really the purpose driven ones. They do it because they want to do it. That's how I, as a professional, look at it. Now, when someone asks us, what should we do when we have a challenge with Scope 3 or supply chain sustainability, etc., the first thing that I say is, don't ask anybody. First, look within and see what is important for your business, i.e., materiality assessment. And many times when we have conversations with people, that point gets missed out. Don't worry about what's happening out there in the world. First, look within and see what is most important for your business. Now, a company like Monzo, which is a leading digital bank and everyone knows about it, etc. I would obviously expect them to have access to a lot of information that's out there on the internet. But given what we have heard today, there is some way to go before you start your journey on the ESG Scope 3 front. The question is, what is stopping Monzo from engaging with the big fours or the large consulting firms in helping you manage your sustainability and ESG?
Nothing. I think it's a short answer. We're engaging them on a lot of things at the moment. I think for us, it's about maturity of an organization as a whole. Yeah, we're a company that's less than 10 years old. We're a procurement team of 4. We are an ESG function of just about 1 person as of 3 months ago, I think it was. So for us, it's not a case of prioritizing one thing over another. It's that this has become the time to start looking at it because we've got the people and board mandate and all of that sort of stuff. And I think that's growth, like many small companies that grow rapidly, right? You focus on product, you focus on growth and revenue and all of that good stuff, and you get through your funding rounds and you adapt and you mature and you start reflecting. And I think as a company, we've hit an inflection point where we are being more reflective, and this is one of the things we're reflecting on. Whether we want to throw money at the big 4 to solve this problem for us, I'm not so sure. We don't tend to do that for many things. We tend to bring in good talent and get them to solve the problems internally, or lean on smaller organizations that are true specialists in this field.
And you would say your point of reflection is because your investors are asking for more information on ESG performance, or is it because your consumers are beginning to demand more from the brand, or both?
I don't think we're seeing much actually from our consumers. Certainly, I'm not aware of any noise around that from our consumers. I think our investors, through the funding rounds I've been involved in, have always asked about it, but it's never been the thing they've cared most about. But I think as an organisation, with it's always been a mission-driven organisation, and the target that was set aspirationally. I think that it's come into focus now that it's 5 years away, and I think that has sharpened people's minds that something needs to be done. And we're also growing at a ridiculously rapid rate. So there's also been a reality check in the business that we will not be able to achieve absolute net zero emissions as an organisation without effectively getting rid of all our customers, right? What we need to do is we need to diverge the paths between revenue and growth on the one hand and emissions on the other. So we'll see it taper off before we see it reduce. And that's key for us, is using an intensity ratio as a more accurate metric of how we're performing against our growth.
Very interesting, yeah. Right, any questions from the floor? I've got one more. Come. I thought you were going to put your hand up in the air then, Daniel. No, just getting your glasses down. Scope 4. So this is now emerging as a subject. What are you doing on Scope 4?
By Scope 4.
Oh gosh, don't ask me. I expect you to answer it for us. Scope 4 is it's all really looking at the benefits that have been achieved through reduction of Scope 3. So it's the added benefits and actually measuring and setting metrics for that, if that makes sense.
That's
Oh, go on then, Naranja, you do a much better job.
it's more about avoided emissions.
Avoided emissions.
Oh, right, yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, I mean, we've done that for a number of years. Like, I can remember we started, this is well before the pandemic. People who we built these amazing conference rooms in our key offices so that some people wouldn't have to travel. It was kind of mind shifting at the time. Now we spend all of our time online talking to people, but it was how many trips didn't we take because we did this, or with the hybrid working, looking at that. And of course, that's part of our Scope 3 now in terms of hybrid, and there are trade-offs. That means that somebody doesn't have somebody that chooses to work from home or chooses to work from home on certain days. There are other benefits in terms of the time that they maybe save, which they were spending in commuting. Maybe it's work-life balance because they can pick their kids up from school, or so I think every time that you have a kind of counterfactual, it becomes difficult to measure. But if I come back to something that you were saying about materiality, I think that really is key. So for us, what is the main thing that we need to focus on as a technology business that's applied, in the areas that I described? It's data privacy and security. It's the stated principal risk. It's customers being willing to pay the prices that we want to charge and thinking about the access to content. But it's interesting, when we did do our double materiality assessment, guess what? Climate is not material. It's not material for you either, because you're a digital business. You have very little footprint. However, we decided to apply an override because we felt that the expectation of investors, of our employees, was significant enough that we should put it in scope. So when you see, we'll publish it voluntarily anyway, our first sustainability statement. Hopefully those of you who are going to have to do it, who aren't in the first wave, will look at what we've done and do it much better. But you'll see we have like a very simple chart, which is, was it impact material, financially material, and climate change, is it? I mean, it's a negative impact that we all have across our direct operations, upstream, downstream. But we decided to apply the override and to report against it. But we were able to screen out other things. Doesn't mean that we don't think biodiversity is absolutely essential to the planet. It's just not where we can have the biggest impact. So everything that we do goes back to that.
Just going on the scope 4 point, I think the way you set up your business in the early days, years, is key to that. We've set up as a remote first business. We've got no plans to force people back into the office for a mandated period. We're also, got, at the start of global expansion and have set in some pretty strong rules about business travel. So I think if you can start that sort of stuff before you're of the size where it's difficult to unwind those positions, that makes the opportunity cost type piece a lot easier for people to get on board with.
Okay, thank you. Right, just one last question, and that is, what would be your key piece of advice to anybody in this room that wanted to do business with either RELX or Monzo?
Just engage us on the good stuff you're doing, whether that's on the E, the S, or the G. We'd love to hear more about it. We'd love to get into the detail of it and have those conversations.
So we're on a journey, and we don't have all the answers. And what good look like at the beginning is not what good looks like today. It's not what good is going to look like in 2030. So we're always interested in having dialogue. We have a lot of great information about our procurement practice and doing business with us on relx.com. So I encourage you to go there. Certainly reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. Speak to David in absentia. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. Really